We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the Friday weekend edition, and this is an opportunity for us to look at a number of very important issues. Yesterday, of course, we talked about the passing of Dr. James Dobson. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll get into some of the issues in the news, a lot of religious liberty issues that we will be talking about, as you might imagine. The District of Columbia actually has hit a milestone in which, who knew, put more people out on the street that are in law enforcement, crime goes down, and Donald Trump decided he would actually go out there on patrol. Again, who would have guessed? But we'll get into that. We'll talk about some of the political realignment taking place. And yes, sooner or later, we're going to get into the very controversial issue of Cracker Barrel. And we have guests around the table that indeed want to address that issue. I suspect you might want to as well. Liberty McArtor is the host of A Point of View, as well as the host of the Know Why podcast. And Jeff Mateer, Executive Vice President, Chief Legal Officer for First Liberty Institute. Jeff, let me come to you for just a minute, because even as we have posted two very good articles here, you've been listening to the oral arguments for something we didn't post but is available on your website, and that is Alaska Airlines. And every time I fly on Alaska Airlines, I think of that flight attendant who expressed an opinion, and she was asked for her opinion, who then got fired for her opinion.
Yeah, so kind of exciting. This morning out in San Francisco, first, I don't know, going to San Francisco is probably exciting in itself. So hopefully our team is doing well. I saw them on camera, so they did make it.
They must have made it.
They did make it into the courtroom. But one of the attorneys at First Liberty, Stephanie Taub, a longtime First Liberty attorney, argued today at the Ninth Circuit in that case. We filed the lawsuit where we had to file, which is in Seattle, Washington, and the court ruled against us, dismissed the case, said that we hadn't made a claim of religious discrimination, where the airline fired two flight attendants because they responded to a company post on the company intranet, on the company message board, where the airline was talking about its support for the Equality Act. And our two clients both questioned that support based upon their religious beliefs. District Court said that wasn't enough to have a claim against the airline and its union. And today we got to air that at the Ninth Circuit. And Kerby, it went really, really well. We've said this before. I've said this before. Presidential elections matter. And one of the reasons they matter are presidents put judges on the Ninth Circuit. And God being in control and sovereign in this case, two of the three were appointed by President Trump. And you could see that in the argument. They clearly were asking very good questions. They asked Stephanie good questions, but more importantly, they asked good questions to the airline's lawyer and the union's lawyer. So, I'm cautiously optimistic based upon the argument. Again, the court took it under advisement, so they'll consider it. Ninth Circuit's been pretty slow on cases, so it could be next year until we get an opinion. But look, I think things went well, and that's what's great about our American system. A trial court can get it wrong, and fortunately, we've got an appellate court. And if the appellate court for some reason gets it wrong, then there's always the Supreme Court.
Yes. Well, again, Liberty, let me come to you, because our first article is something that was questioned last week, because we were talking at that time with Aaron Smith and Kelly Shackelford about the fact that in some places, young people, seniors, can actually decorate their parking spot. Now, I don't remember that in high school. I don't think you had that as a homeschooler either. But nevertheless, whether you could decorate your parking spot, whether you could decorate your locker, whether or not you could could have religious symbols on your notebook. The argument was coming down from these individuals that if you put the word God or a Bible verse, that would be unconstitutional. And we left it last week wondering what would actually take place.
Decorating my parking spot as a senior in high school involved chalk on the driveway, but I didn't have this opportunity. But it is neat that students get to express themselves. And I think that people just need to remember people believe in things. People have religious beliefs, they have spiritual beliefs, and our culture has moved in such a way that we've gone from saying you can't discriminate against one religion to say you can't have any religious beliefs in public. If you want to believe in that, then that's okay, but do it on your own time in private. And to even where a high schooler can't write a Bible verse on her or put religious imagery in her personal space that she's paying for, if I'm correct. This is something that she gets to do as a senior in high school. So again, so thankful for First Liberty's work. Really just reminding, in many cases, government officials that people have religious beliefs and they're allowed to have those and express those.
Jeff, one of the things that you had to do is go to the school because the school wanted to make sure that you weren't going to put profanity or something obscene on your parking place, but they were treating religious imagery and Bible verses almost in the same way they were treating profanity.
No, that's exactly what they do. I mean, Liberty did a great job of describing really the core issue is the lawyers know at the end of the day, the school district lawyers know that that they can't do this. But in so many situations, you have schools who they're either ignorant or they don't care. And they're kind of, again, this is a public school kind of preaching their woke ideology. They don't want religion in the schools. And so they have this, that they set up this thing, well, you can't be religious, that religious is bad, religious is harmful. Well, that's not the law. And fortunately, in the case of this, this young lady reached out to us. And when it came in, I remember having this Keisha Russell was the lead lawyer for us on this case. And
right.
When it came in, I remember Keisha coming and talking about it. And, we kind of said, well, obviously the school will fix this, obviously. But then you're reminded there are a lot of times schools don't fix it. And, in our case representing the teacher in the neighboring state, Connecticut, again, the school should fix the fact that they've suspended Miss Castro from the classroom because she had a cross that she posted, and even though other had put up on her wall, even though other teachers had other objects, and that was okay. But they've dug in. They're going to fight us to the death, apparently. But here, we give credit when credit's due. The school district lawyers actually told the school district what they were doing was wrong, was unconstitutional, and they fixed the problem. So the good for Sabrina is she gets to paint her parking spot. She can put her Bible verse, just like all the other kids are going to put their stuff and their statements. She can do that. But religion is not bad, Kerby, right? That's the message.
Well, and again, that's in New York, and you mentioned the one in Connecticut because, if I can borrow a phrase out of Ghostbusters, humans sacrifice dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. Pretty soon you're going to have teachers wanting to put a crucifix on their public space, But nevertheless, I think there was a little bit of sanity that came to New York, and you didn't have to go to court over that one. So when we come back, I want to raise another question because we were told that because of these decisions that have come down from First Liberty Institute, you could actually post the 10 Commandments. And at least one judge in the state of Texas said, nah, we're going to block that law. So I want to talk about that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
No one knows for sure who called the U.S. Senate the world's greatest deliberative body, but it is often attributed to President James Buchanan. It was the venue where orators like Daniel Webster and Henry Clay delivered great speeches. That is not the U.S. Senate of today. The senators today spend most of their time voting on routine presidential nominations to the executive and judicial branches. As I documented last week, they haven't even been doing that efficiently. When the Senate does consider legislation, most senators have little input. Bills are crafted behind closed doors and often brought directly to the Senate floor, bypassing committee consideration. Debate in the chamber is truncated and usually tightly controlled. But perhaps the biggest reason the Senate has become dysfunctional is due to the senators themselves. George Washington law professor Jonathan Turley points to Senator Cory Booker as one reason for the decline of the U.S. Senate. One day he engages in a meaningless filibuster. The next day he went on a rant about legislation put forward by his fellow Democrats in the Senate. These Democrats were critical of the fact that he misrepresented the police reauthorization bill and didn't even attend the committee hearings when the bill was drafted. They rejected his claim that passing meaningful legislation made them complicit with Republicans or the Trump administration. Senator Booker, along with other Democratic senators and governors, are clearly maneuvering for a presidential run, but their antics and language have cheapened political debate and tarnished the image of a political institution that was once described as the world's greatest deliberative body. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free booklet on a biblical view of genetic engineering, go to viewpoints.info/genetic engineering. Viewpoints.info/genetic engineering. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again in studio with us today, Liberty McArtor, as well as Jeff Mateer. And I might also mention another name, somebody that we've had on this program many times, Matt Krause, who is an individual that is quoted in the second article. But Jeff, let me come to you because he makes some statements about that, but I wanted you to cause people to get a little bit of anxiety or frustration when you read some of the things that came down from this one judge in the area of San Antonio. It's the Western District, who was convinced that even though the Supreme Court certainly has ruled in this case, even though the state of Texas has passed it, both the House and the Senate, and was signed by the governor, and it's something that passed legitimacy, nevertheless, in the inscrutable wisdom of that individual, struck it down.
Yeah, this is one federal judge in one district.
Yes, tried to make that clear.
And that's what we should remember.
Yeah,
this is not the Supreme Court. This is one judge, and the plaintiffs in this case, the ACLU, and it's the usual suspects. The ACLU, Freedom from Religion Foundation, Americans United for Separation of Church and State. They knew where they were filing. We get accused sometimes. Oh, you picked a certain court to rule. Well, yeah. If you have plaintiffs in it, you can do that. And that's what they did. And, of course, this all goes into debate. Can one judge issue an order that stops it for the country, or in this case, for the state? He can only issue an order for the parties in this lawsuit. So that's the first point. The second is his reasoning.
Yes.
What's the legal term I'm looking for? Wacko. That's a Latin term. If you didn't know, Liberty.
Wacko.
I think I remember that
from the Latin. I mean, it's 55 pages.
Yes.
And among other things, I just want to highlight a couple things.
Thank you.
And this is just a taste of the 55 pages. He says, even though the Ten Commandments would not be affirmatively taught, there's a captive audience, and students likely would have questions, and teachers would feel compelled to answer because that's what they do. And then he says, teenage boys, being the curious, hormonally driven creatures they are, might ask, Mrs. Walker, I know about lying, and I love my parents, but how do I do adultery? And then he goes on to say, truly an awkward moment for an overworked and underpaid educator.
Wow.
What is going on?
Is this person living? Yes.
What is going on? I mean, I
don't
just
even want to
This is
respond.
2025, just in case anybody wonders.
Yeah, and this is a federal judge in the state of Texas.
Yes. Okay,
And then
you get
he
the
goes
idea.
on and says, notwithstanding the sausage-making process of legislation, to avoid religious rancor and legal wrangling, the legislature could require this. And then he lists a bunch of things that they could, including the 5 moral precepts of Buddhism. That would be okay. Okay, he says that's okay. He could say, they could say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Be kind, be respectful. And then they could post, all I really need to know, I learned in kindergarten. Share everything, play fair, don't hit people, clean up your own mess. I mean,
I'm supposed to take this seriously.
Yeah, and he should run for the legislature then.
Yes.
Like, I mean, this isn't what a federal judge does. So, again, one federal judge, he doesn't follow the Supreme Court's law. Our win in the Bladensburg case, not mentioned.
Nope.
Kennedy's only mentioned in that there was the expert who testified for the state who mentioned Kennedy, but he completely disregards what the Supreme Court said in Kennedy. He disregards what the Supreme Court said in the Bladensburg case. He applies the wrong standard. I mean, this should be dead on arrival at the Fifth Circuit.
I'm
and
sure
let's
it will
hope
be.
our friends, Jim Ho and Kyle
Judge
Duncan.
Judge
and,
Ho should be enough to
Judge
end that
Oldham
pretty
and some
quickly.
others will get their handle on this.
But Liberty, it doesn't give you really any confidence in some of these federal judges. I can't even believe some of the things that are said, and I do not encourage anybody to read the 55 pages.
I think that's insulting to teenage boys. If I promise that there's a lot of things that they're asking questions about. Asking about one of the 10 Commandments is the least of a teacher's concern.
Well,
so.
if
Actually,
they're
they
going to talk
should
about
ask.
it, yes,
That's
they
a
should
good thing.
ask questions
Let's
about
talk
the
about
10
where these
Commandments.
values
Let's
actually
talk
come
about
from.
lying. Let's talk about killing.
Yeah.
And I think the teacher could handle the adultery question. Not that hard.
Not that hard.
If you,
Not that hard.
Anyway.
Well, again, I just wanted you to know that's our second article. If
Maybe
you'd like to
they'll
read
post
that.
them at Cracker Barrel.
Yeah,
No, I
well,
don't
we're going
think
to get
so.
to Cracker Barrel in just a minute, but that is certainly the case. But yesterday, of course, we mentioned the fact of the passing of Dr. Dobson, and if you go to the website right now, you will see that we actually have a tribute to him, and even talk about the fact that from the very beginning, our founder, Marlon Maddox, who started the program in 1972, welcomed his voice and valued his commitment. Dr. Dobson had been on with us many times before. They, of course, were instrumental in starting Alliance Defending Freedom. Back then, it was just ADF. And, of course, D. James Kennedy and Don Wildman and Dr. Dobson and Marlon Maddox and Bill Bright and a number of others brought that into being. But I thought just for a minute, we might just go back to just a very short clip of some of the interaction we had a while back with Dr. Dobson. A man that certainly doesn't need much introduction, but let me do the honors. Founder of Focus on the Family, and more recently, 2 years ago, launching a new radio broadcast called Family Talk with Dr. James Dobson. The most recent letter I received from him has a picture of him and Chuck Colson. Of course, we remember Chuck Colson. Have done a tribute program for him. And we've posted today the most recent letter by Dr. Dobson, The Truth About Life, which we'll get to in just a minute. Dr. Dobson, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Kerby, I have great respect for you and the work that you do, and it's a pleasure to talk to you.
So again, just wanted you to hear real quickly a short piece there. We could go on and on. Matter of fact, we may post some of those, but even hearing his voice, Liberty just kind of causes us to tear up because there have been so many times he's been on this program. I've been on Focus on the Family a couple of different times, and yesterday I shared one of the times when, back to the 10 Commandments, I might want to break the 10th commandment about coveting, because his program was always taped. And I remember the first time, as a relatively new person being on Focus on the Family, he had a little bit of trouble with the introduction. He kind of took a run at it a couple of times. We're doing an interview. All of a sudden, he just stops and says, okay, what do you think should be the next question? I asked Kerby. And I thought, we never have that freedom when we're doing a live radio show. So certainly over the years, thousands and thousands of radio stations carried Focus on the Family. Later on, when he went on to do his own program because of some disagreements that took place there, I think the very first program that he did in his new format, Penna Dexter was the co-host, and we'll talk about that with her next week. But all of us have great memories of Dr. Dobson. I know a lot of people of your age have memories of Odyssey and all sorts of things like that, and certainly Focus on the Family.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Focus on the Family was certainly a big name in my household as I was growing up, and I know that influenced my parents a lot as they were rearing kids and homeschooling. And just, again, the Adventures in Odyssey was more than just a fun entertainment for kids, but really a vision that I am so grateful for that Dr. Dobson had of giving kids quality entertainment that pointed them to truth and helped them to wade through some of those moral and ethical questions, and just has such a lasting impact on pretty much anybody that I talked to that grew up in that time. And in any, sort of Christian household, that is such a big part of what formed them and something to be grateful for.
Yeah, I have the same sort of, I feel like it's a family member because he played such an important part, I know, for my wife and I in raising our children. Because I remember the first time I got to meet him, of course, I was with Kelly Shackelford, and I told Dr. Dobson, hopefully my daughter's not listening, I said, we've read your Strong-Willed Child book, but you never met my daughter. And he, of course, and just the way Jim Dobson was, just kind of smiled and said, oh, Jeff, yes, I have. And I so appreciate him. And we sometimes, for us as evangelical Christians, we don't always honor people, but he is truly a father in the faith for so many of us. And I know had such a tremendous impact on Kelly Shackelford, and there might not be a First Liberty without a Jim Dobson. He plowed so much, so it's great to remember him. It's great to remember him.
Again, we have that tribute there. If you go to First Liberty, I saw there's a picture of Kelly and him and a tribute there. And of course, if you are out on the internet at all, almost every ministry has been talking about their wonderful remembrances of James Dobson. So I just thought that I might mention that. And as we go to a break, you will see that we have the tribute. Right underneath it, we have the $10 campaign. We'll talk about that a little bit later, especially Liberty and I can talk about that. When we come back, let's get into some other issues, because who knew? You put some law enforcement out on the streets and the crime rate in the District of Columbia drops precipitously. And so a good piece by Katie Pavlich about D.C. hitting a milestone. And then, guess we should have guessed, Donald Trump decides to go out on patrol in the district. Talk about that right after this.
Let me ask you something, if I may. Have you been blessed by Point of View? We often hear from listeners about the positive impact that Point of View has in their lives. As one listener told us, Point of View leaves me informed and encouraged. So this may surprise you. Out of all the Point of View's hundreds of thousands of listeners, just 1% supports the program. And yet Point of View relies on listener donations. If every listener gave just $10, Point of View's full ministry and operations would be funded for an entire year. Let me ask you again, have you been blessed by Point of View? I urge you, pay it forward today with a $10 donation so others may be blessed as well. Give online at pointofview.net. Or you can call us and give toll-free 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Jeff Mateer, Liberty McArtor in studio with us today as we get into some of these issues in our Friday weekend edition. Let me just mention that our third article by Katie Pavlich reminds us that the D.C., District of Columbia, hits a milestone because she says it's been nearly 2 weeks since President Donald Trump reestablished control over the District of Columbia. And Liberty, if you just run some of the numbers, and I will go through all of those, 630 arrests, seized 86 illegal guns in the district, 53 arrests just made yesterday. That goes back a day ago, but still that's the case, plus 24 ICE arrests, 10 guns taken off the street. And again, for the first time in years, and I used to live outside of the District of Columbia, first time in years, a week has gone on without a single murder in the District of Columbia. Now, we've been told by some of our Democratic friends, well, the murder rate was going down. Well, yes, and the assaults were going down, but going down from a high. And if the District of Columbia were a separate state, it would be the most dangerous state in the country.
Wow. Yeah, it's... I understand that there are maybe some legitimate concerns about executive overreach or limits, but whenever people talk in this context about it, and then you look at the results or just the circumstances previous where so many people were in danger in Washington, D.C., that's not your best argument to fight, federal overreach, because it's like, well, hey, now the crime rates have dropped even more and even faster. And that's one of the very primary roles of government, isn't it, is to protect its people. And so I think that that's encouraging that we're seeing that improvement.
Yeah, and I mean, and in the end, the District of Columbia is a federal. It's a federal jurisdiction.
Yeah.
That's right. It's
not a state, nor should it be. And this is one of the reasons why. Mm-hmm. And you have so many federal employees. And I will just tell you, I mean, that's probably, I was trying to think, I'm probably in D.C. I probably average 10 times a year.
I was going to say,
about once every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'll be there next time. I think my next trip is early October. I was there not too long ago. And I will tell you, there was a change after COVID. There's a change in the city. And I would not, for instance, I like using the public transportation, the metro, to ride, but at certain times I wouldn't use it anymore. I mean, there were attacks on it, and relatively not what you would say that you would think that they're completely unsafe areas. I mean, there are some areas of D.C. even before 2020 you would want to avoid, but now we're talking about crime really in the tourist areas. So the downtown area, when you think about the monuments and the mall and those areas surrounding that, I mean, that's where a lot of activity. Well, those are employees, federal workers, and tourists. Mm-hmm. So I think what the president's doing is absolutely 100% behind what he's doing, because it does need to be cleaned up and fixed up, and and of course, they've had a parade of really bad mayors in Washington, D.C.
Marion Barry.
You know where I was going.
Marion Barry.
Just because he's found in a room with cocaine and things. I mean, that's sort of the tradition of mayors. And
unbelievable.
Yeah, I
just cannot make this up.
It is. I was always I am for sort of taking the territory, limiting it, and giving Maryland, Virginia.
That's what I've always thought.
Some of what you would call the neighborhoods where people live, but the actual downtown, that should just be under Congress. It's the federal. And then allow Maryland and Virginia to absorb the neighborhoods.
And having gone to Georgetown in Washington, D.C., having lived in Virginia, I know why they aren't real interested in that, because I had an article the other day that showed the hot spots of District of Columbia. And they said, just imagine Donald Trump on the roof of the White House. Oh, he was there the other day. And if he looks to his east or to the northeast, that's where almost all the crime is taking taking place, although, as Jeff has pointed out, now it's working its way into the Smithsonian and the Washington Monument and Lincoln Monument. But over the last 7 days, carjacking's down 83%, robberies down 46%, car thefts down 21%, overall violent crime down 22%. I think there's something to actually putting people out on the street who are part of law enforcement. And earlier this week, we were talking with John Lott, because John Lott has even pointed out that because of the deportations taking place and a number of other things, if the trend continues, we'll have the lowest murder rate in America ever. So it isn't just the people that are violent criminals being deported, but it's also the presence of ICE in the community, which causes potential criminals to stay indoors. The same kind of thing. If you see a lot of a National Guard walking around, and earlier we talked also with Senator James Langford from Oklahoma, he says there is just the deterrence factor of when you see people that are out there arresting people, even if you were thinking of committing a crime, you're going to think twice about it.
Yeah, you would like to think that people would not think they can get away with that, especially in the nation's capital. But clearly, there was the precedent that they could. And I haven't traveled to D.C. in a long time, but I did live there and work there for a while as a college student and interning and working part-time. Parking a far way away because I couldn't afford the parking garages, and walking in the dark of night because I was interning for the morning radio program, and touring all the areas with my friends on our hours off so that we could see all the things in downtown. And I just think of myself as a 20-year-old woman or whatever, and wanting to be protected. And so there are so many young people in D.C. too who are there for those internships and those jobs. And again, it just really needs to be a safe place, including for the people who live there. As well as all the tourists. And so I'm glad to see the crime rate going down.
Sounds good. One other one I want to put up, and that's our fourth article, Matt Vespa. Donald Trump said he was going to go on patrol in the district. Now, I don't think he's done that, and I don't know that he will. As a matter of fact, I think the Secret Service going, I don't think so, Mr. President. But nevertheless, he announced on, we've had Todd Starnes on before, Todd Starnes' program, which he said he was going to go out on patrol that night with the D.C. law enforcement and military. And I thought that was interesting. I did see where he had delivered pizza to some of those individuals, but isn't that amazing? If nothing else, one thing that we can always assume, Jeff, is that always the showman, Donald Trump, is going to be out there doing something.
Well, and that's what we talked about. I don't think he's done it, because I think if he had, we would know it.
we would see
know.
Pictures.
Obviously, he announced that on Todd Starnes, and obviously having worked for a politician, there are some times when the politician says something and the staff looks at each other and says, "You can't do that. He can't do that. He can't do that." I did wonder. I mean, if he does go on patrol, will he stop at a McDonald's?
Yeah.
Because cops are going to, and obviously we love law enforcement and so much appreciate law enforcement.
It would be a donut shop, Jeff.
Yeah, it would be not. But for Donald Trump, it wouldn't be a donut shop. It would be. He would want to go to McDonald's. But
there you go.
It does tell you something about Donald Trump. They even have the idea that I'm going to go out and patrol, and I'm sure Secret Service was like, that is no.
Yeah,
Mr.
probably not a
President,
good idea.
That's
you
not
cannot
happening.
do that.
But maybe he can get one of the caps or the hats that the police officers wear, because he's worn the construction hat, he wears all the hats literally, because anytime he goes and he takes photo ops, and I think that's why so many people love him, because he's not afraid to show that he's, with the people and the workers in that regard. So maybe he'll have another
the best
hat
one.
to his
What was
selection.
the best one? The garbage. I mean
yeah, he knows how to stage a photo op, but that was just, you didn't see anybody else doing that. So,
No.
Garbage truck, a McDonald's, going on patrol. You just never know.
And he gets away with it. Compare that to someone that you'll know the name. And Kerby and I will remember the imagery, but Michael Dukakis,
oh, yes.
with the tank.
The tank.
I mean, where Donald Trump knows actually how to do it, how to stage it, where Michael Dukakis not so much.
Didn't work out as much. For anybody who didn't get the inside joke, your husband is in law enforcement, so that's where Jeff was referring to,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So again, we will come back and get into some other issues, but I just thought you'd like to see that. It is illustrative of the fact that both in the conversation we had earlier in the week with John Lott, which really really was started out about artificial intelligence, but of course he is also known for looking at crime statistics and everything else. But then also the conversation we had that we played just yesterday with Senator James Lankford on his new book, who was in studio with us. It's amazing how many times people are saying, if you want to understand the value of law enforcement, if you want to understand the impact of deterrence, just look at what has happened with ICE agents going into these communities and look at what has happened when you deploy the National Guard into a place like Los Angeles, or in this case, the District of Columbia. So very good information there. Let me come back, though, because I want to talk about a piece that Cal Thomas has put together, Migrating from Blue to Red States. Not necessarily a new fact, but there are some aspects of it that illustrate again that we are in the midst of a realignment of this country, and maybe it also explains why we're hearing so much about gerrymandering. So we'll talk about that right after this.
The frontrunner in the New York mayoral race has a lot of bad ideas. Soon after Zohan Mamdani won the Democratic primary, John Katsimatidis, owner of New York City's two oldest and largest independent supermarket chains, wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal. In it, he warns about what is probably the worst of the candidate's campaign promises, a government-run alternative to private supermarkets. Mr. Mamdani calls this a public option, and he wants to start with 5 stores, one in each of New York's boroughs. Mr. Katsimatidis points out that in Venezuela and Cuba, nationalization of food distribution brought poverty, rationing, and hunger. He writes of citizens standing in lines for hours to get a loaf of bread or a bag of rice if there was any food left at all. Washington Post columnist Megan McArto says Zohan Mamdani's stated goal is to help bring prices down and provide oases in the city's food deserts. Food deserts? Ms. McArto says there's no obvious food gap for the city to fill, and points out that almost everyone in the city has at least one grocery store within walking distance. And as for promises of lower prices, she describes the grocery business as one of the most hyper-competitive and efficient parts of our economy, with profit margins that have historically averaged around 1 to 3%. Mr. Katsimatidis reiterates, supermarkets operate on thin margins, complex logistics, and decades of supply chain expertise. He wonders, who is going to manage these public grocery stores? The same government that can't fix subways or public housing? The reality is that city-appointed bureaucrats would end up selling groceries at a loss, subsidizing even wealthy New Yorkers, and imposing huge costs on taxpayers. The phrase no profit motive may sound benevolent, but like Mr. Mamdani's promises to freeze rents and offer free busing, public supermarkets would only serve to remind New Yorkers of socialism's devastating consequences. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, one of the things we've done in our Outlook magazine, and also this is one of the booklets I'll hold up here, A Biblical Point of View on American Realignment, is to recognize some remarkable changes taking place, because we have geographical realignment, we have political realignment, economic realignment, even income realignment, and a lot of that is certainly illustrated by the simple comment that people are moving from blue blue states to red states. But Cal Thomas reminds us that one of the things that we have seen is a remarkable shift in which more than almost 1.5 million Californians have left the state, almost 1 million from New York, and almost 500,000 from Illinois. You go, well, where are they going? Well, Texas, Florida, places like that.
I know where they're going.
And so, Liberty,
Plano.
what about
They're all
this?
moving to Plano.
Yes, they are. Frisco, all those kinds of things. But this migration is kind of interesting because, Liberty, here's the issue. Okay, we're losing people from these states. And so because we are high-tax states, people are leaving. So then we're losing taxpayers. So we're going to raise taxes even further. It almost looks like a doom loop. What are your thoughts?
Maybe look at the states where they're moving to and see what those policies are, or do an exit poll. Why are you leaving the state? And they'll probably say, because I can't afford to live here. It's not a good place to raise my family. I'm living in a 2-bedroom house here, and I can buy a 5-bedroom house and a bunch of land in the state that I'm moving to. And so, it seems like, are you willing to learn lessons or not? And I guess the answer is no as of right now.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
And I really think that I hope the people who are coming leave their politics in the state.
That's, of course, the
because
question.
what we don't want, certainly speaking as a Texan, the people fleeing from California should realize that there's a reason they're coming to Texas, and it shouldn't be the Californian policy. I know when I lived in Austin for my time down there, my time in captivity, I was in lived in one of the downtown apartment buildings, high rises, and almost everybody was from California, and they all complained about California, but they all were liberal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, don't come here and mess. I mean, you can mess up Austin because how much worse can it be? But don't mess up Texas because there's a reason you left your state, and it's your liberal politics. So learn something, why you're here, why we have less taxes, why it's a good place to raise your family. So I just hope when I see these numbers, I did think it's kind of interesting when our legislators from Texas, the Democrat legislators, these are the states they fled to. And they could have kept them. We could have, we could lose that 50. They could go, that could be the reverse of this migration. But they did come back.
You did say about family, and the other day I did a piece called California Leaving, and it was all based upon the CEO of In-N-Out Burger. And that is Lindsay Snyder is the president, and she has lived in California. She grew up in California. Most of the In-N-Out Burger establishments are in California, although some are, of course, here in Texas and other places. But where did she move? To Tennessee. And when she was being interviewed by Allie Beth Stuckey, used to be on our Millennial Round Table, she said, I really love living in Northern California. I'm so thankful I grew up there because I think it changed a lot of who I am. But even though there are a lot of great things about California, raising a family here is not easy. And, of course, doing business here is not easy. And I thought, Liberty, that was interesting because as a mom, she was not just thinking about, as a CEO, all the regulations and how difficult it is to run restaurants or even to find land and build another restaurant. They talk about how long it takes from the time you get the land to the time you open your restaurant is anywhere from 2 to 3 times longer in the state of California than it is in other states. But then she was looking as a mom of what that meant to even live in that community as well.
Yeah, it's something that I hear a lot as a resident of North Texas, lifelong resident of North Texas, might I add. I have seen how many people are moving here. And so many neighbors in my neighborhood, or even new families joining our homeschool group this year, are from California. And they'll be quickly to say, but we're not those Californians. So they try to allay those concerns.
That's my daughter-in-law. My daughter-in-law is one of those Californians who, in not your particular homeschool group, but one of the affiliated ones. But,
yeah. And they're talking about, I loved it. It's beautiful. Grew up there. it's just not a good place to raise family. We have so much more freedom here, and we're able to provide more for our children here. There's just more economic freedom. And so I'm seeing that a lot just anecdotally, and I think it is a big concern for people once they start having kids saying, okay, this really isn't sustainable. We could have so much more of the kind of family life that we want if we moved to a state that is freer.
The other thing that when I think of California and I think about our cases, there's a very strong hostility towards people of faith.
Right.
And so we have a case I know we've talked about here before is representing, speaking of homeschoolers, so you can be reimbursed, except you can't be reimbursed if it's anything religious or even touches religion. And so, I mean, that's one policy that the state has. And of course, our case down in San Diego, public school, there's a lot of families don't have an opportunity to either homeschool or to send their kids to private school. They've got to send that economically they have to, or because of their work, they have to send to a public school. But then they go to public school and then they get this ideology that's completely contrary to their religious beliefs. And the school district or the school basically saying, tough.
Yeah.
You've dropped them off at the doors. They're ours now, and we're not going to tell you. I mean, again, that case, the school's position was, we not only are
can't opt out.
Yeah,
we won't
not only
you.
Can you opt out, we don't even have to tell you what we're doing with your children.
Yes,
that's the state of California, and that if that were my community, I would want to move to Frisco or Rockwall, somewhere in Texas or somewhere in Florida.
The other one is Colorado. We've had Lathan Watson here many times. Of course, you know him very well. And he's jokingly said that we need to put an express lane in from Colorado to the Supreme Court, because you think of Jack Phillips, who was the baker who has been hounded for year after year after year. You think of one of the individuals producing various kinds of web pages, and that one went to the Supreme Court. There's one the other day that looked like it was going to go to the Supreme Court because they were trying to force one of the camps in Colorado to actually require that boys could be in the girls' cabin and go to the restroom. Well, they finally got that one off. But even now they got another one, which is, I guess it's born again or a Christian, whatever it is, like a kind of used books, and the whole issue of pronouns and all the rest. And it seems like there's another one with counseling as well. It just seems like there's certain states where any kind of religious liberty is put so far down as a priority that it keeps ADF and First Liberty in business. But
I would add New York and Connecticut to the list.
Yes.
But yes, I agree.
We just started with the New York one there as well, and Connecticut. So there's just a couple off the top of our head. We come back, though. Democratic Party has some challenges, but interestingly enough, the New York Times said, the problem isn't branding, it's you. It's the policies that you have. And since we talked about Lindsay Snyder moving to Tennessee, that's the home of Cracker Barrel. So I figured by then we'll get into that conversation as well. Just before we take a break, let me mention again, we have a lot of the information on our website. We, of course, have our $10 campaign. And if you would want to chip in $10, just say, appreciate what you're covering today here on Point of View, we would greatly appreciate that. You can respond to the email or simply click on the button that says Give Now on our website at pointofview.net. We'll be back right after this.
Point of View began all the way back in 1973 as a listener-supported ministry, and we are still a listener-supported ministry. But out of the hundreds of thousands of Point of View listeners, just 1% donate to keep the program going. Imagine what would happen, how many people we could reach together if the 99% stepped up to donate as well. It doesn't take much to make a difference. In fact, we've done the numbers, and if every listener gave $10, Point of View would be funded for an entire year. If you're in the 99%, why not join the team of listeners who make Point of View a reality for everyone else? Chip in your $10 today. You can give online at pointofview.net. Or you can use your phone and call right now at 1-800-347-5151. Again, that's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just wanted to tell you, too, how much I have appreciated Point of View over the years. I've always been taught that we take care of our own, and I feel like Point of View is one of our own because of the Christian worldview that you do promote. And so I have become a partner today, and I just want to thank you so much, and just God bless you for all that you do.
Listen, I wanted to make a quick comment. I'm a relatively new listener to the show, and I really kind of stumbled upon it more than anything because I'm doing some driving now that I wasn't in the past. And my comment really is, I think you guys and gals are more right on about the assessment of this country right now than anything I've heard. You know, I go home and I tell my wife, you've got to hear what they're talking about on the show. It's just so right on. And I tell my parents the same thing.
I'm 25 years old, and I started listening to Point of View about 4 years ago, and it has changed the way that I think and the way that I view the world around me.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, we'll get out of politics for a few minutes and get into the cultural issue, because everybody seems to be talking about Cracker Barrel. And so one of the articles that I've posted here by Jim Garrity, who we quote quite often, says that here is another example of a well-known American corporation, which has been doing just fine. I'll give you some of those numbers in just a minute. Suddenly embraces a sweeping redesign aimed at placating modern sensibilities. And so this new logo is one that has removed both the cracker and the barrel, if you will, and has certainly made things look very generic. And I meant to bring with me, I have this bag, and last time I was speaking, actually, that was at the Hope Center on Wokeism. In that bag, I've got a empty can of Bud Light. I've got a Ben & Jerry's ice cream tub. I've got a Target bag, actually, that's carrying it, and a variety of others. And I think I have a model of Cracker Barrel, so I should put that in there as well. So one of the questions I asked both of Liberty and Jeff was, should we even cover that? And I got back not only yes, but certainly yes, we should talk about this. So, Jeff, you were the first one to react, so I want to get your thoughts, because it does strike me as something that everybody in the talk world is talking about. So I thought we'd talk about it here on Point of View.
Well, I just think it's an example, and I'm really surprised it's now, because this is a discussion that maybe they should have did this three years ago, but it's a classic, to me, textbook example of a corporate leadership who's completely lost focus on what happened before that's brought this brand. Think of the brand Cracker Barrel. And I was trying to think, who are their competitors? I mean, they've done such a good job of branding, but it's the place you go to. The concept of walking through the store that has all those sort of nostalgic items that you don't need, but I'm pulling, and she probably is listening, my wife out. We don't need that. That's it's here. I mean, it's all those things. I mean,
yes,
and it's what a concept. It's sort of the, you go to the museum, you got to go through the gift store to get out. It's the same thing with Cracker Barrel. And look, is it the greatest food of all time? No, a homemade is better, but it's pretty close. Those biscuits are pretty good. The country fried steak, the chicken fried steak, I mean, it's pretty good considering it's a chain. I literally do remember the first time I was driving from Pennsylvania to Texas, and I remember stopping at this place in Tennessee and walking in, and it was close to a spiritual experience. I mean, it was such a nice
revival in the South.
It was just, I mean, and good country food at a reasonable price.
Yep.
And this corporate leader, relatively new corporate leadership, they've completely lost focus, and their stock is tanking. There's a reason their stock is tanking. People don't want to get. I mean, don't become woke, and don't destroy the things that made you who you are. And don't change the formula of Coke.
Yeah.
Don't have a transgender person promote beer. I mean, these seem to be common sense.
They sure strike me as such.
But Cracker Barrel doesn't understand it, and this leadership doesn't understand it.
Yes. And again, just before we go to Liberty, I might just point out that as a restaurant chain, it is bigger than Cheesecake Factory, bigger than Five Guys, bigger than Waffle House, doing pretty well. It was founded in 1969, and many of the original ones were located near the interstate, but now Cracker Barrel's all over the country, and some of you maybe up in the Northeast or Alaska are going, okay, I've never heard of this, but most everybody else in the listening audience has, and Liberty, just about everybody has an opinion about this.
Yeah, well, as somebody who grew up taking lots of road trips, that's how my family would travel, and we stopped at Cracker Barrel all the time. That was a staple on the road, and again, growing up here in Texas, just around town too. And so I loved going to Cracker Barrel. It's, for people who haven't been in, the classic decor, once you get past the fun old country store and into the restaurant, is that the walls are just covered with knickknacks, old black and white photographs. And you feel like you're walking into Grandma and Grandpa's house. And there are rocking chairs. And so it's very unique. And that was part of the character of the place. When I heard that they were changing the whole decor theme, I didn't even know that it was a woke thing or it's taken on a life of its own. The controversy has. I just thought, I literally thought, I think that the CEO is actually a few years behind the trend, kind of like you were saying, Jeff, because they're changing it to just look like any generic restaurant, very minimal decor, which is the whole opposite of the Cracker Barrel aesthetic. And if you look at what Gen Z and younger millennials like myself are talking about, it's how we miss the character. Like Pizza Hut used to be a fun place with these, with neat interior design. McDonald's used to have, more smiley faces, and everything just looks like a box now. And it's just all very plain and nothing has character anymore. And so now Cracker Barrel, the most character-y restaurant that you could go to, is just going to look like another plain diner. And so I just, again, do you really know what the trend is in terms of what people are nostalgic for? And I just don't understand. And do you know your clientele? So, and apparently not. So to me, it just seems like such an off design choice, but yeah.
Some people said that going to Cracker Barrel was maybe like going to Grandma's kitchen, and now with the re-decor, it's like going to her nursing home, and that didn't work out so well. Again, as I point out, 34th largest restaurant chain, but bigger than Cheesecake Factory and Waffle House and a variety of others. And again, there's an experience there. You're eating your biscuits and your particular chicken tenders while there's a rake over your head and an old fishing rod and maybe a picture. And you said that sometimes in the old days they used to take some pictures and put them in there.
Oh yeah, it would be the joke to say, well, we're going to frame an old black and white photo and we're just going to hang it on a clear spot in the wall at Cracker Barrel because there are so many, and it would never be noticed. And that was kind of the fun thing. So maybe people need to start doing that again, and little by little we can rebuild the aesthetic of Cracker Barrel.
I mean, are they going to do away with the chairs, with the rocking chairs? Is that?
I saw the interview with her, and she said she was going to keep the chairs
or the table games.
Yeah, and I think they're going to keep the pegs. But there was a big joke about the fact that if it's a white peg, we're not allowing it to move. So it's back to the whole
Babylon Bee.
yeah,
Babylon Bee.
All those kind of things. You saw something where even other CEOs are taking on Cracker Barrel.
Yeah, I mean, Steak and Shake, which I haven't been to in a long time. It seems like a good place, but they're trolling Cracker Barrel, and actually they called for the firing of the CEO. and sometimes people want to change things just to put their own personality on things. At Cracker Barrel, their goal is just to delete the personality altogether.
Yeah.
At Steak and Shake, we take pride in our history, our families, and American values. All are welcome. We will never market ourselves away from our past in a cheap effort to gain the approval of trend seekers.
Strong words.
Go for Steak and Shake.
It's the battle of the brands.
How about that?
Battle of the brands. Well, I did think we would mention that. We'll come back and make a few other comments. By the way, even though we don't have the phones open, if you want to leave a comment on the Point of View Facebook page, I'll read some of those as well. And, of course, we also, by the way, have a picture of the interview we did the other day with Senator James Lankford. So, again, there's all sorts of ways in which you can communicate with us. We'll continue our conversation right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
No one knows for sure who called the U.S. Senate the world's greatest deliberative body, but it is often attributed to President James Buchanan. It was the venue where orators like Daniel Webster and Henry Clay delivered great speeches. That is not the U.S. Senate of today. The senators today spend most of their time voting on routine presidential nominations to the executive and judicial branches. As I documented last week, they haven't even been doing that efficiently. When the Senate does consider legislation, most senators have little input. Bills are crafted behind closed doors and often brought directly to the Senate floor, bypassing committee consideration. Debate in the chamber is truncated and usually tightly controlled. But perhaps the biggest reason the Senate has become dysfunctional is due to the senators themselves. George Washington law professor Jonathan Turley points to Senator Cory Booker as one reason for the decline of the U.S. Senate. One day he engages in a meaningless filibuster. The next day he went on a rant about legislation put forward by his fellow Democrats in the Senate. These Democrats were critical of the fact that he misrepresented the police reauthorization bill and didn't even attend the committee hearings when the bill was drafted. They rejected his claim that passing meaningful legislation made them complicit with Republicans or the Trump administration. Senator Booker, along with other Democratic senators and governors, are clearly maneuvering for a presidential run, but their antics and language have cheapened political debate and tarnished the image of a political institution that was once described as the world's greatest deliberative body. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free booklet on a biblical view of genetic engineering, go to viewpoints.info/genetic engineering. Viewpoints.info/genetic engineering. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, we won't spend just a whole lot of time on Cracker Barrel, but I think it's just one of those cultural trends that we have seen a lot of people talking about. And we haven't mentioned, there was one very good video where somebody actually spent the time on a YouTube video going through all the different corporate affiliations, LGBTQ and all sorts of different groups and BLM and on and on and on. And again, if your clientele are individuals that are not real political and are certainly not necessarily into painting, as they did in one case, the rocking chairs as a rainbow, that probably doesn't help. But then back to the point that Liberty was making, this looks just a lot more kind of generic. And when you are used to going to a restaurant that had dark woods and walls covered with antique signs and tchotchkes and all sorts of things, it's really, I think, caused some people to wonder whether or not they want to keep going to the store. And they're free to make the decision about what they do with their grocery stores and with their restaurants and their gift stores and everything else, and we're free to decide if we want to go. But aren't there some political and legal implications, Jeff?
Yeah, I think there are. So the changing the logo, changing the decor. Look, corporations can do that. That's what that they make those decisions, and they can do that. But to me, changing the decor, changing the logo is a symptom of the bigger problem, and some of the folks have pointed this out. I mean, Cracker Barrel is embracing DEI, and which is, as we recognized in the last segment, it's like they're like behind the times in doing that, but they're embracing DEI, and when that happens, and you're actually your policies, your corporate policies are impacting your locations, they're impacting your employees, they're impacting the value of your company. Well, those then could create problems for the corporation. So I believe there's already been a demand that the Department of Justice investigate. And the reason to investigate is not,
there you go.
I mean, DOJ should not care about that they changed their logo, but what they should care about, are they creating a work environment that potentially is hostile to those who hold traditional values? Because you have a company that for almost its whole history has been identified with traditional values, Southern traditional values, now completely trying to step away from that. I mean, how are they going to treat their employees? How are they going to treat their customers who hold to those traditional beliefs? We started today with the Alaska Airlines. It's the same sort of story. Alaska Airlines is, I think you remember, Kerby, they used to give out prayer cards. The founders of Alaska Airlines were devout Christians.
Yes.
Well, they're not devout Christians today. They're actually a place where it's hostile to people of faith. So is that where Cracker Barrel's going? So there are some legal implications that DOJ could look at and see, are they creating a hostile place against people of faith, either as customers or as employees? And I think the Attorney General of Tennessee, where Corporate Barrel, Cracker, that's how to change the name to Corporate Barrel. Cracker Barrel. Cracker Barrel is based in Tennessee, so the Tennessee AG would have some. The other is, look, if I'm a shareholder,
that's a good question.
And let's say I bought
where the stock
Cracker
goes.
Barrel, thinking, I want to invest my modest investment as a nonprofit lawyer. I want to take some, and I want to buy stock in a traditional American company. And the job of corporations is not to be woke, not to DEI. It's to make money for their shareholders. And if they're not doing that, if the leadership at Corporate Barrel, I'm going to keep saying it, at Cracker Barrel is saying, we want to promote DEI, we want to promote inclusiveness and diversity and equity at the expense of the value of the company, then they open themselves up for shareholder derivative suits. I think we're going to see it. The way the stock's gone down and what the CEO is doing, I mean, some plaintiff's lawyer is going to jump on that and bring a lawsuit. So it's more than just changing the decor. It's more than just changing the logo. It's really you've got a corporation that established a reputation. They're pulling away from that, and they could be doing things that discriminate against people who hold traditional values.
I don't think anybody ever complained about the old Cracker Barrel. So it was a place that all came to eat good food, some home cooking or as close as you could get, and just kind of enjoy the environment. And so it's funny because I've seen comments on social media and things like that. People of all backgrounds and kind of away from the bigger talking heads debating about this, saying we don't want Cracker Barrel to change. We love Cracker Barrel. So I am not as surprised of what's been going on behind the scenes in terms of leadership policies at corporate. However, I think it was always just a popular restaurant for a lot of people. So if they're trying to be more inclusive, it seems like they've actually done the reverse.
What's next? Tofu steak or something? They're going to have tofu.
That's going to be even more controversial.
It's going to be tofu and no more biscuits.
If you really want to get people riled up, the kind of people that eat Cracker Barrel, then...
Oh, yeah, and I think turkey. There are people who go there. I know a group in my little town. Yes. They're there almost every morning. So, and if they do away with the biscuits... I mean, people will be in the streets if they do it with the biscuits.
That's true.
Let me broaden it just a little bit, because we did get this conversation the other day when we talked with James Langford, because even if you go back to his particular discussion about this particular group in Oklahoma that gets around and talks about all the issues, or you go to, as I quoted, former Senator Ben Sass in his book, most people are talking about the fact that we live in our bubbles anymore. And I don't know the president of CEO Messino, but I do know a little bit more about Elisa Heinerscheid, and she was the one at Bud Light that said, Bud Light really needs to evolve. It needs to elevate its iconic brand because Bud Light has been kind of seen as a brand of fratty, kind of out-of-touch humor that we really need to change. Okay, that did not work well. And there is a sense in which if you have come into the corporate world, and I do know that the current president of Cracker Barrel had worked at Taco Bell and a few other places, and you think that it's just really time to just update everything in terms of the decor, in terms of, and I'll hold this up if you haven't seen it, the logo, which is kind of a nothing burger. It just seems to me that you are living in your bubble, and it's like, as some people might want to ask, Liberty, have you ever been to a Cracker Barrel?
Yeah.
Have you ever eaten there? Have you ever spent some time talking to the people that are coming in and out and buying all the various candies and goods and things at the gift store? Because this is probably going to miss a demographic very quickly by making this change.
Yeah. Have you ever enjoyed the product you're in charge of marketing? And I think lesson number one when you're marketing anything is to know your market and know your clients, know the people who are interested, because you can't be everything to everyone. So find your niche, find
Right.
what you can be to who appreciates what you have to sell, and then do that well. And it seems like in our trend of going more generic and trying to be more inclusive, you're actually making everybody upset because nobody really stands for anything anymore. Maybe that's too deep for, thinking about corporate restaurants and things like that. But it seems like that's kind of where we are as a culture.
Yeah. But again, if you're in that bubble, you go, I don't really understand these people.
Right.
And I mentioned just a few minutes ago, if you're the CEO of Waffle House, I hope you understand your group and who is going to be the type of person that's going to come to Waffle House. Or, of course, I mentioned that this one even has greater exposure than Cheesecake Factory. Each one of them have a group. And if you bring your bubble into that and don't understand the individuals that you are trying to sell a product to or a service to, you're not going to be very successful.
I would think they did some sort of focus group.
You would hope so.
But where did they go? Martha's Vineyard to get their focus group? I mean, if you went to like some rural town in
Coastal grandmother aesthetic comes
if you
to
went
Cracker
to
Barrel.
Greenville, Texas, I can't imagine anyone said in Greenville, Texas, we're going to change this image. We're going to do it. And they thought it was a good idea. I do imagine if you went to Martha's Vineyard, not picking, I don't know why I'm picking on Martha's Vineyard or, I don't know, some San Francisco, then yeah, I get it. But maybe they want to have Cracker Barrels in San Francisco and Martha's Vineyard, and they don't want them in Greenville, Texas anymore.
She did say on Good Morning America that she had actually talked to many of the owners that were very excited about that in Florida and some others. So, everybody has their bias. But nevertheless, I thought we'd just focus on that because we may be seeing one more corporate brand that isn't going to do so well simply because of a CEO that was convinced it was time for a change. Anyway, let's take a break. We have a lot more to cover. We'll do that right after this.
Let me ask you something, if I may. Have you been blessed by Point of View? We often hear from listeners about the positive impact that Point of View has in their lives. As one listener told us, Point of View leaves me informed and encouraged. So this may surprise you. Out of all the Point of View's hundreds of thousands of listeners, just 1% supports the program. And yet Point of View relies on listener donations. If every listener gave just $10, Point of View's full ministry and operations would be funded for an entire year. Let me ask you again, have you been blessed by Point of View? I urge you, pay it forward today with a $10 donation so others may be blessed as well. Give online at pointofview.net. Or you can call us and give toll-free 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Final half hour, Jeff Mateer, Liberty McArtor in studio. And just a minute ago, we were talking about being in a bubble, and I'll leave it to you to decide whether or not you think the CEO of Cracker Barrel's in a bubble. But this brings us to the other article, this one also by Jim Garrity. The only thing wrong with the Democratic Party is who they are. And right now, there's a real sense of introspection. Why are Democrats not doing well in terms of the polls? And you certainly can go back to this article that appeared in the New York Times. And again, because it was in the New York Times, it was interesting because Shane Goldmacher with Jonas Smith really looked at the voter registration in over 30 states that track voter registration. 20 do not, but of the 30 that do, Democrats lost ground to Republicans in every single one of those states between 2020 and 2024. And there's a nice graph that you can see if you go onto the New York Times, but that's also referred to in this article as well. And this stampede, which has been occurring, is not just in the battleground states, but it's in both the blue and the red states as well. And it brings me back to this issue of bubble. I did a commentary a while back in which we talked about Charles Murray, who actually put together a test to figure out how much of a bubble you live in. And what he found, and by the way, you can go on to this day to the PBS website. PBS is still going on, I think, although the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is closing down, but PBS still has it there, and you can fill out the quiz and find out if you live in a bubble or not. And interestingly enough, Jeff, the bubbliest zip codes were in New York or California, but in particular, places like the Upper West Side in New York, the Lower East Side in Manhattan, Brooklyn, in San Francisco, especially in Silicon Valley, in Los Angeles, which are all, of course, Democratic strongholds. And going back to this article, it's just, again, that I don't get the sense right now that many of the leaders in the Democratic Party are getting outside of their bubble. And this article has a picture of Jasmine Crockett, has a picture of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has a picture of Tim Walz, and you can pick out a few others that are becoming to be the rising leaders in the Democratic Party. But right now, it illustrates that if you were to hold the midterm elections today, Democrats would not do well, regardless of what happens with gerrymandering.
Yeah, I think and to me, I wonder if the primary system has something to do with this as well, because you think about the one of the statements that I just kind of did a double take that and is evidence of that living in a bubble is that Democrats thinking that they're not liberal enough.
Yes, that was one of the comments in the New York Times.
And I was like,
got the article that was surprising.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you keep thinking that. Go more liberal, because I think that the playing to the middle is, as a Republican, Democrats thinking that they're too liberal is shocking. But I do think the primary system does that, because
it does somewhat, yes.
Because it forces you have more of the hardcore on both the right and the left more likely to vote in primaries. And so you have to play to your primary, and so you end up with the AOCs of the world, you end up with the Newsoms of the world, and then I know Penna Dexter had a good commentary that folks have had a chance to listen to or will, going to Point of View, on the craziness that's happening in New York City with, is it Madani? Is that how you say it?
Mamdani, M-A-M, Downey, Mamdani.
Who is a real communist. And these are they're not the future. I about said future leaders of the Democratic. They're not the future leaders. They are the leaders of the Democratic Party
really
today. And we have in Texas, we've got Crockett. I mean, these are hard. These are folks that are hard left, and they're succeeding because they can win in the Democrat primary, and they're in districts which their different districts are lean left, and there are really no other alternatives after they get through the primary process. So I don't know. The primary system may be part of this. And we all like to be around people, I guess, who say what we like to hear. Yeah. And so
and social media reinforces that.
Yes.
Because in the old days, and again, before I go to Liberty, let's, as the two old guys around the table, remember that Richard Nixon used to say that the primary system is such where the liberal or the Democrats go left and then race to the center in the general election, and Republicans go to the right and then race to the center. And all of a sudden, then in 1972, George McGovern said, no, we don't need to race back to being center, and lost. And then again in 1980, 1984, in this case, Ronald Reagan won 49 out of 50 states. And there was a sense after a while of Democrats, no, we don't need to try to moderate what we say. And the real successes of, say, Bill Clinton and even Barack Obama, even though they had some pretty out of the mainstream kind of ideas, they didn't talk about them during the campaign. But now, Liberty, what you're seeing is that Jasmine Crockett and AOC and others are saying some pretty outrageous things. Zohran Mamdani, who probably will be the next mayor of New York, are saying things that you wouldn't have heard a Democrat say just a few years ago.
Right. I want to kind of zoom out for a minute. When we talked about the test to see if you're in a bubble, it reminded me of an interview I did on the No I podcast last year. It was actually with Chris Butler. He's with the AND campaign. But one of the things he said is, regardless of whatever political party you identify with, try to make a list of 10 things that you disagree with regard to your party, that you think they're getting wrong. And if you can't do that, you may have been brainwashed by your party, because no matter who you are, you shouldn't just, buy everything your party says, right, hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
And so I want to then mention that since religious affiliation has declined so much in the United States, I think a lot of people are really getting what is essentially their religious worldview through politics. And I think you see this on both sides, but you do see more people still identifying with traditional religion and going to church on the right than the left. So maybe there are more people on the left who really are kind of replacing religious zeal with political zeal. And then when you go back to Jim Garrity's article that you posted from National Review, he said you can't make your party's brand identity all about believing that you're better, smarter, and more enlightened and more compassionate than the majority of your fellow citizens. But if you believe in the politics of your party with religious zeal, you're not going to give that superiority up because you're believing it with religious zeal. And so I think that's it really is totally framing the worldview. The political party is not just a tool for a lot of people to engage with the culture. It really is kind of the end all be all for them.
And I've seen, and of course we've talked about this before, whether it's MAGA or whatever, I've seen some individuals that cannot talk about anything negative. I've never heard a discouraging word about Donald Trump from some on the right. But what was so interesting, back to the point you made a minute ago, Jeff, is the comment sections in the Times, in which, first of all, many of the readers were saying, well, the problem is the Democratic Party hasn't shifted far enough to the left. Then some of the other comments include people saying, you shouldn't even be writing about this in the New York Times because it might be helping Trump, instead of being maybe at least self-reflective enough to say, maybe we're not doing some things right. And then some people just dismissed it. But I think Jim Garrity points out something, and that is when you change your party registration, that means something. Mm-hmm. It isn't just like flipping a coin. I mean, you were registered as a Democrat, and after all the things that transpired in 2020 and 2024, you said, you know what, I'm switching over to the Republican Party. And that, I think, represents and reflects something very fundamental and maybe even a lasting change. And so when the New York Times, to give them credit, covered this, they got a lot of pushback because they didn't want to talk about this. And they actually said, well, that just illustrates that we need to just go further left and we need to punch them in the face. Didn't we have Beto O'Rourke say that the other day?
Yeah, we did.
Just all these kinds of mindset that you're saying, you're just not even self-reflective enough.
Well, how big is the Democratic Party? I mean, I when I think of the Republican Party, there are Republicans who are not Trump, who are not Trumpers.
Yeah.
They're
pro-choice Republicans.
There are liberal
Republicans.
There are moderate Republicans,
yeah.
And there are Republicans who are more conservative than Donald Trump. When I think of the Democrat Party today, I mean, the Joe Liebermans.
Where are they?
Where are they?
Yeah.
I mean, they don't exist. So if you're a Democrat who is more moderate, I mean, where do you go but leave the party? And I think that's what Democrats are faced with. I mean,
yes.
they only have left or more left, or like my favorite show, the Bob Newhart show. You know, my brother Daryl and my other brother, they left more left or further left is where you are in the Democratic Party today.
I'll end with this. Washington Post writer saying it's time for us to be honest. This version of the Democratic Party is arrogant, patronizing, taking minority voters for granted and treating them like children. Well, maybe the minority voters aren't even into that. And maybe we need to think about the problem is more than just the party brand. Anyway, just thought you'd like to see that article, and it's going back to a very good piece that appeared in the New York Times. And 3 cheers for them publishing it in the first place. We'll be right back.
The frontrunner in the New York mayoral race has a lot of bad ideas. Soon after Zohan Mamdani won the Democratic primary, John Katsimatidis, owner of New York City's 2 oldest and largest independent supermarket chains, wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal. In it, he warns about what is probably the worst of the candidate's campaign promises, a government-run alternative to private supermarkets. Mr. Mamdani calls this a public option, and he wants to start with 5 stores, 1 in each of New York's boroughs. Mr. Katsimatidis points out that in Venezuela and Cuba, nationalization of food distribution brought poverty, rationing, and hunger. He writes of citizens standing in lines for hours to get a loaf of bread or a bag of rice if there was any food left at all. Washington Post columnist Megan McArto says Zohan Mamdani's stated goal is to help bring prices down and provide oases in the city's food deserts. Food deserts? Ms. McArto says there's no obvious food gap for the city to fill, and points out that almost everyone in the city has at least 1 grocery store within walking distance. And as for promises of lower prices, she describes the grocery business as one of the most hyper-competitive and efficient parts of our economy, with profit margins that have historically averaged around 1 to 3%. Mr. Katsimatidis reiterates, supermarkets operate on thin margins, complex logistics, and decades of supply chain expertise. He wonders, who is going to manage these public grocery stores? The same government that can't fix subways or public housing? The reality is that city-appointed bureaucrats would end up selling groceries at a loss, subsidizing even wealthy New Yorkers, and imposing huge costs on taxpayers. The phrase no profit motive may sound benevolent, but like Mr. Mamdani's promises to freeze rents and offer free busing, public supermarkets would only serve to remind New Yorkers of socialism's devastating consequences. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, I might just mention that Penna Dexter's commentary today is called Government Grocery Store, which is, again, a look at Zohan Mamdani. Again, if you're not familiar, we, of course, talked about this before. We've got 2 polls now, one the Gotham poll, one the Siena poll. He's leading. I mean, he will probably win. Andrew Cuomo is running second, but I don't see anywhere that he comes back from that. Mamdani, by the way, was a assemblyman in the state of New York, Muslim born in Uganda. He is declared member of the Democratic Socialist Party. And Liberty, one of the things that's so interesting is when you look at the primary, for sure it was the Gen Z voters ages 18 to 29 that were a major factor in him winning the primary. But they're still saying that the younger you are, the more likely you are in New York City to vote for Zohan Mamdani.
Yeah, it's true. And I do think that we need to recognize some of the frustrations, and as we have so many times on point of view with just the economy for a lot of young people graduating college, and they're having a hard time affording things. But socialism has always been popular with younger people typically. And one thing that I would say if I was talking to somebody who maybe was leaning towards supporting him or thinking that things like public grocery stores and socialist ideas were a good idea is there is a lot of concern with Gen Z, and this kind of goes back into the Marxist worldview of power imbalances. And you see that with frustration toward CEOs and corporations and things like that. But then on the other hand, then you say you really want the government to have that much control over your life and to be in charge of everything that has to do with where you get your food, where you get your health care. And do you think that they're going to steward that well and that vulnerable people aren't going to be taken advantage of in that situation? Because I promise you they will be. And so it's not the just, equal type of society that you think it is that's going to sound so good. A lot of people are going to be harmed.
I mean, this guy's about to become mayor of our largest city.
Largest city in the country.
And I mean, he's a Marxist. I mean, and
not really backing
and I don't
off from
know
that.
if he would step away from that.
No, he's pretty much gone along with that.
My suggestion is if he loves it so much, before he brings it to our largest city, that he go spend, 2 months in North Korea and see how he likes a Marxist state. I really don't understand. I don't understand how even if you're a liberal Democrat, how you vote for someone like this who wants to take away private property and certainly this idea about government-run stores. What does the government do well again? What's the list that the government does well? Running a grocery store, the government's going to do well. And as Penna's outstanding commentary points out, I mean, the people criticizing it, are small businessmen, right? I mean, this is who it impacts. I mean, he's going after small businessmen. We're not talking about going after...
And those are the people we supposedly care about.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't you got mail and it's the big box bookstore coming in, forcing the little bookstore out. He wants the big government come in and force all the little people out. So, I've never been a big fan of New York. Certainly don't like the Yankees or the Mets or the Jets or the Giants. But this is crazy, and it's actually serious. And I think you're onto something, Liberty. I mean, there is a dissatisfaction with young people.
Can't buy a house, can't pay off their loans. I understand that.
And so there is an opportunity for us as conservatives, for us as Christians, to offer hope and alternatives. And I blame a lot of this. Go back to the public school system. we're just not instilling values. And of course, we started talking about the 10 Commandments today. Well, what's wrong with those values? Let's instill those values, because we're not doing that. And the result is, we have a Marxist who's about to be elected mayor of our largest city.
A few weeks ago, actually saw an article in the Free Press where there was a woman who was a millennial. She was around my age, saying that she understood the hype around Mamdani because she felt the same way about AOC back when she was becoming very popular. And she was just enamored with all of these ideas and the passion that she spoke with. But she started a family. She continued working, kind of, realized that, okay, these ideas, while they sound good, they actually just don't work out. And so she was sympathetic with the support Mamdani is receiving, but saying, hey, to, my younger siblings, so to speak, from somebody who's a few years older, this just doesn't really work out the way that you think it's going to. And of course, people have been saying that for years.
I might just mention, too, that we will be doing more on this whole idea of socialism. We posted the other day a piece by Star Parker, but didn't get to it because of some things that changed. And it's got one coming out as well by David Harsani, Socialism is as Popular as the Media Might Think. And even one by John Stossel, who's done 2 videos on Mamdani because he says he's going to be my mayor. So next week we'll try to get to that. We had a guest cancel yesterday or the day before, and I wished I'd thrown all that together together then, because that is something I think we need to do more education about. And even in this article that Star Parker put together, there have been all sorts of studies that have been done looking at the world and saying, okay, which countries provide the greatest amount of political freedom, the greatest amount of economic freedom, and the greatest amount of economic upheaval. And you would, of course, guess that, interestingly enough, in economically free countries, you only have about 1% or less that face extreme poverty. And yet you can see the numbers and percentages that are off the charts if indeed you wanted to send, as Jeff wants to, Zohan Mamdani to one of those socialist countries. And also in the booklet we did, there are people like Bernie Sanders who are saying, well, you're using the wrong illustration. Venezuela, well, that's not right. And North Korea, that's not right. But Sweden or Norway, well, those are socialist countries. And I quote from a historian or two in Norway saying, well, no, we really aren't. And in Sweden, they said, yeah, we were socialists for a while and it didn't work and we had to go back to a free market. And this is the kind of information we need to get to the younger generation. And again, one of the reasons why we always encourage people to know about the Know Why podcast are those kinds of things you want to get to the younger generation, because if anything, I understand the concern. And even the other day, when you had Elizabeth Warren with Zohan Mamdani, she kept talking about affordability. That's the key Democratic word, affordability. Well, if you want to make things affordable, don't have the government do it, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, what about eggs? I mean, what happened to eggs during Joe Biden and inflation? I mean, those are all the issues. And the government, I mean, the Penna points out, I mean, the government does well operating housing. It does well operating the subway. No, it does nothing. There's nothing that private can't do better than government.
Yes. And again, if you want to get rid of food deserts, I've talked about that before and done a deep dive. First of all, it takes about $15 million to establish a store, whether it's a Kroger's or an H-E-B or whatever it might be, a Safeway. And then it only has a very narrow operating margin, about 1% to 2%. And I've lived in communities where grocery stores have gone broke. So to think that the government can handle all that, when you've got people that spend every minute of their day trying to make sure that H-E-B or Kroger's or Safeway is financially successful, you know what that's going to bring. Well, we're out of time, but again, if you would like to find some of the articles we've been talking about, or you'd like to know more about what's happened at First Liberty, we have all those links on our website at pointofview.net. Most importantly, I want to thank Megan for her help engineering the program. Steve, thank you for producing the program. Next week, we have Hal Haubecker, Shane Pruitt, and a variety of other individuals. I think you will enjoy the conversation. Enjoy the weekend, though. Get out of politics. Maybe go to Cracker Barrel. And we'll see you back here on Monday, right here on Point of View.
Point of View began all the way back in 1973 as a listener-supported ministry. And we are still a listener-supported ministry, but you know, out of the hundreds of thousands of Point of View listeners, just 1% donate to keep the program going. Imagine what would happen, how many people we could reach together if the 99% stepped up to donate as well. It doesn't take much to make a difference. In fact, we've done the numbers, and if every listener gave $10, Point of View would be funded for an entire year. If you're in the 99%, why not join the team of listeners who make Point of View a reality for everyone else? Chip in your $10 today. You can give online at pointofview.net, or you can use your phone and call right now at 1-800-347-5151. Again, that's pointofview.net. and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.